Whereas Roman involvement in the history of Britain often tends to focus on military campaigns, there is another important dimension to the story that emphasizes commerce and trade. And it is this aspect of Roman Britain that was emphasized in the dozen readings given by Edgar Cayce for individuals who were informed of past lives as Romans active in Britain. To put these readings into a broader context, keep in mind that Edgar Cayce gave dozens of readings for individuals with past lives in Rome proper and outlying regions within the empire. With regard to Britain, there were two primary reasons for Roman involvement: military and commercial. From a military standpoint, a successful campaign was a symbol of power among the Roman elite. So long as there was no ambitious politician looking to advance his career by military conquest, Rome generally preferred to manage its empire through cooperation. The commercial motive for Roman involvement in Britain was less glamorous, but an important incentive nonetheless. The empire was like a business that had to be run efficiently. Essentially, provinces were managed by bribing local leaders with power, wealth, office, and status. In return, natives were expected to maintain peace and adopt a Roman lifestyle, including participation in the empire's economy by buying products and paying taxes. The payoff was order, security, and infrastructure in terms of roads and towns. Belonging to the Roman Empire was basically a matter of lip service and payment. As long as you professed allegiance to the emperor and paid your taxes, you were given a great deal of latitude in how you managed your affairs. With this bit of background, let us now consider the actual cases of reincarnation provided in the readings. The chronology of these incarnations tend to occur during the early decades of Roman Britain, from the reign of Julius Caesar through Emperor Claudius. A reading for a 59-year-old man described a past life at the time of Julius Caesar. In the name Edbert, this individual was chosen to investigate the potential for trade and commerce with the Britons. From 48 to 44 BC, Edbert visited Britain and obtained information for his analysis. The report was favorable, with particular attention to the quality of the soil for agriculture and presence of minerals that could be mined and converted into products to be used throughout the empire. The reading for this man observed that the skills and attainments in that past life could be harnessed in his present life as a consultant who judges the value of natural resources and advises individuals with regard to vocational opportunities. A 27-year-old civil engineer was told that he had lived as Eschlotho, an associate of Mark Antony, the Roman politician, general, and supporter of Julius Caesar. Although Eschlotho was a soldier, his role appears to have been mainly directed toward logistics, resource management, and public relations. He traveled widely throughout the empire, including trips to Britain. He was tasked with gathering data and how best to govern and bring conveniences to the people. In his present life, he carried over abilities as a natural analyst that can, with a mere glance of the lay of the land and landscape, make determinations on how best to manage the available resources. Clearly, that Roman incarnation provided him with abilities and interests that served him well in the 20th century as a civil engineer. A reading for a 19-year-old male college student described a period of great expansion during the reign of the early Caesars. With the name Agrilda, the individual served as an agricultural consultant under 3 emperors, not just Julius Caesar. Apparently, he could judge what could best be produced in the varied lands with the least effort, taking into consideration the different climates, soils, and conditions throughout the empire, including Britain. His scope of expertise extended to commercial trade in stone and brick, as well as fur and feather, wood and seeds. His reading noted that in his present incarnation, he possessed the ability to be an expert on conservation that will become an increasing concern in the human experience. His was a definite mission to not only increase efficiency of material production, but to spiritualize the process for the greater good of humanity. A 60-year-old labor leader received a reading stating that he had lived as Artemis Lun during the reign of the Roman Emperor Claudius. While serving as an emissary, Artemis Lun created some turmoil among the higher authorities due to some controversial proclamations. He was rebuked for his forwardness and served in his latter years in the northern Wales area of Britain, where he contributed to Roman rule. He had to face some karma from that experience in his present life, but also carried over a fondness for all things Welsh. A 44-year-old business machine salesman was given a reading that described a past life during the period of Roman expansion as an empire. As Libris, this man served as a commercial representative to the peoples of Spain, France, and Britain. Libris investigated natural resources of the land, such as minerals and soils that were used in the production of pottery, jewelry, and the like. The reading for this man focused on the ideal and purpose that motivated Libris. That ideal was to labor together for good, that all might be aided or helped. Thus, not only would the state be expanded and advanced, but the living conditions of the individuals in those provincial lands would be improved. A reading for a 54-year-old housewife described a past life as Rosalind during the expansion of the Roman Empire. Rosalind traveled to many lands, including Britain, where she functioned not as an invader, but rather as one who encouraged the service of expansion. During her travels, she experienced a shipwreck that brought about a fear of water and the dark. Yet she persisted in her desire for travel, the change of scenery, and the thirst for knowledge of the varied lands and peoples she visited, especially their religious beliefs. Despite the physical hardships inherent in her work, there was spiritual gain through the application of knowledge, not only for the individuals she served, but for the land itself. Almost a form of spiritual ecology. In her present life, she carried over a deep sense of loyalty to any cause that she might adopt. A reading for a 43-year-old woman described a past life as a man named Romalanon, a Roman sailor. In an interesting choice of words, the reading observed it was a time when there were the attempts to sail in other lands. Keep in mind that Romans were much more comfortable on land. Sea transport was a risky undertaking, as has been noted. The reading mentions that this sailor had charge of the Roman fleet that came to what is now Ireland and England. The soul gained through the experience with the ability to meet any situation under control as a leader and teacher, whether for purely material control or for mental or spiritual guidance and direction. A reading for a 19-year-old man described a past life as Romalu during the periods of Roman expansion rather than conquest. In a revealing choice of words, the reading goes on to note that various lands, including Britain, came under the influence of Roman rule. Romalu had the responsibility for overseeing the local native leaders for political as well as economic reasons. In his current life, the young man carried over a dream to visit in person, or at least read about, varied lands. The latent talent to judge the abilities of groups and leaders to produce certain needed things was noted. A reading for a 49-year-old Jewish businessman cited a past life as Cardan, who was not only a soldier, but also an administrator that helped maintain the connections within the empire, including Britain. A reading given in 1942 for a 28-year-old soldier described a past life in the Roman Empire, where he served as a representative in varied regions, including Britain. Known as Kedward, this individual acted as keeper of the guard, judge, and protectorate who preserved order and collected taxes. A 70-year-old woman was told that she had lived as Duane in ancient Britain. Duane was born to the first Roman settlers in the land. There was material hardship until the mining of coal, zinc, and salt was established, at which time the parents and associates of Duane became quite wealthy. No resource was spared in the development of Duane, who became rather spoiled and arrogant, patterns that were to be met in her modern life. A 62-year-old stockbroker received a reading that described a past life as Tumotu, during those periods when there was the greater settlements in Britain. Tumotu was given authority to judge the abilities of people to supply material necessities. In particular, he developed skill in evaluating agricultural commodities, such as grains. Although he was a soldier, his role was expanded to that of economist and judge. In his 20th century incarnation, he was cautioned not to judge himself or others too harshly. In these several Cayce readings that discuss Roman Britain, there are no great surprises. In fact, the details provided are remarkably consistent with mainstream history. It is significant that the emphasis is weighed heavily in the direction of commercial relations and resource management, with regard to the soul development of individuals who received the readings. Even if they were soldiers, the military aspects of Roman activity in Britain were not discussed in any detail. Rather, the emphasis was on how the past lives in Roman Britain were still echoing in the 20th century consciousness of those who received the readings. As U.S. citizens, they were also living in a powerful nation on the cusp of developing its own empire of sorts. The same skills and abilities were still relevant, but must be directed by a constructive ideal, as it had been by many during that era of Roman Britain.